Welcome to the Longevity Man podcast, where we delve into the minds of extraordinary men who have embraced self-care and longevity. My name is David Ito, a holistic life and wellness coach. We discuss all things longevity specifically for men, from healthy lifestyle choices to expert advice and inspiring real-life stories that will help you take action towards a healthier and longer life. Today we have Kurtis Zenner. I'm excited to talk to him about his life story, about his yoga story. So without further ado, welcome, Kurtis. Who are you? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
My name's Curtis. Most people call me Kurt. Some people call me Zen. My last name is Zenner. I am almost 64 years old. I'm an architect. I have a great job right now where I mentor less experienced staff.
This podcast is about longevity, and longevity can be approached through different ways. You know, we often talk about mobility. You also have a path in yoga, your yogic journey. So I'd just like to hear a little bit about actions towards longevity. Like, how have you taken longevity as part of your goals and your objectives in life now, and hear about like what made you focus on your own self-care and longevity?
I would say that part of it has to do with my family situation. And what I mean there is I have four older brothers, and um, I grew up on a farm, so they're mostly all farmers. And what I was noticing as a younger sibling was just how they were aging, how they were approaching aging, and how they were having replacements, knee replacements, hip replacements, you know, always going to the doctor. As I got older, I could feel my joints really sort of started to ache. And even though I was cycling a lot, close to eight miles a day, going back and forth to work, I would find that, the intensity of my job, which even though a lot of it was sitting, but even though I didn't like to sit that much, I was kind of forced into a sitting position most of the time. And I would try to get up and go to the pick things up at the copier, go check in on my coworkers. But as I was leaving my 40s and coming into my 50s, I would notice that when I would stand up, my legs didn't want to cooperate.
You mentioned inflammation at the time. Did you connect the dots between inflammation and dementia, inflammation and, joint deterioration?
I mean, I would do some reading, some research about inflammation and diet, and, having always had a fairly healthy appetite. But I would also see that, my my body was changing, my metabolism was changing, and I didn't like that either. But I think the real, so there was that try to do it with diet, like, making smoothies every morning, very natural, eating whole foods. I started doing some research on my own, looking for something that might help me counteract. And really what I came up with was a yoga class, doing some yoga. I'd never done yoga before. I mean, at this age, I would think I was like about 56. I sort of started focusing on um, Bikram Yoga, which, is hot yoga. Now he's kind of out of favor for various and sundry reasons, but at the time I was seeing a lot of YouTube videos and things like that, and kind of really researching and seeing some testimonials of people about how therapeutic it was, and how the combination of the movement and the heat was really good for you. So yeah, I stepped into my first hot yoga class at the age of 57. I had just turned 57, so this was January of 2018, and it was difficult, but I fell in love with it because it was like um, uncovering myself, like coming, pulling away all these layers of stiffness and immobility and kind of rejuvenating, if you will. I was to a point where I was doing 5 to 6 classes a week, um, you know, taking a day off maybe. But it was like life saving. I loved it.
I've practiced Bikram yoga myself, so I know how challenging that could be. And for someone, and I already had almost 20 years of practice, yoga practice before going into Bikram. You were completely new. So I can only imagine how challenging that was holding those poses for so long under such immense, high heat. So for those people watching the podcast now, they've never heard of Bikram yoga, or they have, maybe they've heard stuff, about like scandals and stuff. But that aside, can you tell us physically what was so challenging? Let's say during the first couple months, what was challenging for you when you were practicing Bikram yoga? What was your body telling you, and how were you overcoming that body mind kind of complaint, rejection? Why are you doing this to me? Like, how did you deal with that?
But as I got into it, it became easier, because it's like, talk about like if you can deal with this challenge, you can deal with any challenge in your life. Um, People would complain about the light shining in their eyes, and she's like, get over it. It's not about making you comfortable. And if you read any of Bikram's books, his preambles are kind of like too, Americans are lazy. They're crybabies. And so anyway, I think that having those two things, remember to breathe, and you can always lie down and just let the heat help you too.
Solving the initial problem. How did that all evolve over the course of the 2018 and onward?
I really enjoyed it. It was very therapeutic. I learned a lot about myself, about my health. At this time, I was loosening up. I mean, I started out really pretty stiff, not being able to get my hands below my knees when I would bend forward, that type of thing. And I wanted to progress, to become more proficient in what I was seeing the practice to be. Because as a young person, I was really pretty flexible. And so I started really sort of becoming more aware of that and like, well, how do I challenge this? Because the class is very rigid. I mean, you start with the breathing exercise, you do the postures, you end with the breathing exercise, class is over. Unless they were having, like a special intensive weekend where they might have a person come in and really sort of explain the postures or what you needed to do with your body, like stretching up before you bent over, things like that. A lot of it was trying to learn it by osmosis, just the little clues you could get. And, it's hot, it's steamy, you know, um, so I did some more research and I found a style of yoga called Yin Yoga, which is really more about just letting gravity move your body and allowing a longer hold to um, allow your body's muscles and musculature to release the inner fascia, the fascia are the little layers of very thin layers between your muscles, and not muscle groups, even within the muscle, there's layers, how they're bundled. And I found that practice along with the Bikram practice to be very helpful because that allowed me my muscles to sort of release.
I wish I had a yin practice when I was practicing Bikram because I think it's a perfect combination, to be honest. I mean, not just Bikram with yin, anything with yin. But for those people who are watching the podcast and don't understand or realize what yin is here, the reference compared to yang. Yin is a more um, effortless form of yoga. And typically it's floor based. Typically it's just using the force of gravity to help us get into the pose. So that's why it's effortless or very little effort because we're just letting gravity do. So we're placing the bodies in different shapes, in different forms to then let go and relax. And that's how we manage to, you said, release a muscle. So that's I think that's really great combination. And I'm sure it was really powerful. And you saw how by combining both, it was exponentially good.
I also am a firm believer in massage, so I typically have a massage about once a month, once every 6 weeks, something like that, because I think that's another practice that's very, very helpful for um, you know, dealing with those buildups of tightness or deposits that of I don't know, chemicals or whatever, but also trauma. We hold a lot of trauma within our bodies. During this time, I was finding, it was very therapeutic. I was no longer having issues with carpal tunnel. I was able to move better. I was able to bend over and place my hands flat on the floor. So it was like this quote unquote fountain of youth, if you will.
Let me ask you, in addition to gaining that range of motion, which is not just range of motion, when you practice this kind of more intense yoga style, it's not just range of motion that now you can reach and grab like the upper layers of your pantry or whatever. It's like you are bending like I'm not going to say a gymnast, but you're bending in ways that are amazing, even for a 20-year-old. Being able to bring the heel of your hands on the floor as you're folding forward. Not very many 20-year-olds can actually do that. So you're taking your body's range and capacity of motion to a different level. In addition to that superior range of motion. How else did your yoga practice improve your quality of life?
I think what it gave me was more of an awareness of who I was and that I wasn't my brothers. I wasn't, I'm my own person. I'm on my own journey. But I wasn't quite as aware of that, but I think that was a very subtle change over the course of classes, over the course of weeks and months. As we age, that's really important too, to continue to make friends, finding outlets to make friends other than just people you work with. Because oftentimes those are people you work with. It's like you're friendly, but you're not necessarily after work friends or things like that. The other thing about that they talk about is, okay, that was that pose, let it go. Move on to the next pose or challenge. It's like, that happens in life too. Some of the things we hold on to, it's like we hold on to for too long. So as I was doing my yoga, it's things like my body dysmorphia. I'm a pretty fuzzy guy, and so my first class, it was all about the shirt, having the shirt. And the second class, I was like, it is fucking hot in here. I'm ripping this shirt off. I could care less what someone else thinks of my body because I am suffering. It's just so hot, So it's just like, oh wow, I took off my shirt in a class full of people and no one cared. And it's like, why have I been holding on to this for so long? You know? So things like that. I mean, that's just part of that whole awareness of yoga.
It's a game changer, right? Like when you stop caring. These are just, examples of so many life lessons that we learn on the mat, but truly it's off the mat. These are lessons that we carry into our lives, into other realms of our lives. And yoga is just, the let's call it like the laboratory is part where we work things out, and then we realize, oh, what an amazing lesson. I can now express this. I can now carry this into other parts of my life. So that's a really beautiful example, and thank you for sharing that. Now, how how did that progress? All right, so now you're doing great. What happened next with your yoga practice? Can you fast forward and tell us from then until now, how have things changed or progressed?
Right. It has a way of freeing you both physically and mentally, uh, to do to to allow yourself to, um, and I think that's a key word for me too, allowing myself to do something, to try something, to be different. Just I think that's been a real life lesson in my yogic journey. And it's continuing.
Just to wrap up, I'd like to ask you what kind of advice or message would you give to those guys watching us who have never practiced yoga, who are either afraid of yoga or think that, whatever, for whatever reason, yoga is not for them. What piece of advice or recommendation could you give them?
Well, I know a lot of the stereotypes, yoga's for bendy people. I'm not bendy. Um, Yoga's a woman's sport, which is not true. Yoga was developed by men, dominantly for men in India. There's a lot of messaging in our country and our Western civilization about what men should be and what they shouldn't be. Whether you're straight or gay, um, or somewhere in between. And I think that we have to be brave. We have to be heroes in our own worlds, which a lot of our world we live in our minds. We talk to ourselves more than we talk to anybody else in our life. And I think yoga is a way to sort of step back and counteract that, and allowing sort of your true inner voice, your true inner person, your authentic self to come forward.
I think there's so much depth in that message of learning to allow ourselves. We try to contain ourselves. We try to follow the patterns. We try to follow, what we've been told and programmed is right or wrong, or where we can or cannot do. And yoga is not the only one, but it's a great way to revisit all of that, reframe and reprogram
Mhm.
ourselves. All right. So, Kurt, thanks so much for your time today. It's been wonderful hearing your story, your journey, your path, all the things you've learned through your yoga practice towards longevity, towards health. And I'm sure that guys out there watching this might be interested in reaching out to ask about your journey in more depth or whatever. So, how can guys reach out to you if they want to?
I would be happy to respond to people with a DM, a direct message, um, and saying that they saw this or they follow you.
Thanks again for your time. It's been wonderful having you here in today's podcast, helping guys in improving their quality of life and longevity.